I think there's about, well, at least 15, around about 15 people registered. So welcome everybody, bienvenue. I can speak English and French, so if you want me to say something you can write to me in the chat in French if you like. And if you want something translated, I will happily do that, but I'm intending to do this in English. So, welcome to the session on the ICOM CIDOC training program. I don't think we'll be using the whole 2 hours, but that depends a little bit on you and if you have lots of questions. So what I'm intending to do is explain to you something about the training program and then show you what is available for training during the conference and check that that all works. And if you then have questions, you want to ask me things, well, we will discuss. So please keep your microphone off while you're not talking. And if you want to say something, please just interrupt. Turn your microphone on and interrupt me. This isn't a formal presentation, so we can stop and have a conversation, talk about things if you have questions as we're going along. I hope that's okay for everybody. Does anybody have any questions about what we're doing right away? No? One new message. All clear. Okay, well, let's get going then. So this is the CIDOC training program presentation. So off we go. Oops, too far. There we are. So as you probably know about CIDOC, we have a conference every year. This is an overview of all the conferences we've had since 2011. They go back further than that. I actually started myself in CIDOC in 1993. So we've been meeting for a long, long time. CIDOC was actually created in the early 50s, shortly after ICOM itself. It's one of the oldest committees. However, in spite of these conferences that we have and all the documentation we have and so on, we realized that something was missing and we needed to have a training program. So this is what this is about. By the way, the little photograph there is from the Dresden conference in 2014. And you get a special bonus prize if you recognize somebody in the photograph. So we have lots of standards and publications that are online and are available. You can find these on the CIDOC website. There are fact sheets about things like how to label objects, how to register objects. There are guidelines, things like the International Guidelines for Museum Object Information, Statement of Principles on Museum Documentation, which has been adopted by ICOM as part of its legal framework, and the CIDOC conceptual reference model that you might have heard of. And also there's a bilingual newsletter, which we've been publishing since 1989. That's in English and French. All these things are online. They're useful reference material, but they're not training material. They're material that you might find useful to use during a training, but they're not really introductory material. We also have this Principles of Museum Documentation, published in 2013 and adopted by ICOM. It states some important aspects about museum collections, and it forms part of the framework of legal instruments that ICOM has produced. So anybody who joins ICOM and signs up and becomes a member of ICOM agrees to respect the ICOM Code of Ethics and also agrees to respect these principles of museum documentation. There are 3 essential points in it: that museum documentation is necessary to safeguard the collections, to demonstrate legal accountability, and for the value for research and interpretation of the documentation. Incidentally, the little picture you can see is of some of the physical documentation at the Art History Museum here in Geneva. I was head of documentations for a few years. Dominic Raimondino, who's organizing this conference, took over from me when I left. So we realized that we needed a training program to provide introductory and advanced training, professional training for people working in museums and for people starting out. Now, you might be lucky enough to be in a country that has training in museum documentation available. I know it's the case here in Switzerland, at least in some cantons in Switzerland, but it's not always the case. And we found a little bit to our surprise that even in some countries where museology training is available, the practical training, how do you actually do things, physically do things, is not always available. In some countries, the training tends to be rather theoretical, and when you actually have to start marking numbers on objects or finding ways of wrapping things up and storing them safely, then the training isn't available. So we realized that we had to organize something, and the CIDOC training program was the result. The photograph here is from the very first edition of the CIDOC training program that took place in Texas, at Texas Tech, and you can see there three of the participants, Esther Chipasu from Zimbabwe, and Julia Rosno from Germany, and Teresa Stradiotto from Brazil. So it gives you an idea of the international character of these training programs. People come from all over the world, which is of course part of the interest. The CIDOC training program is designed to be modular, so it consists of a series of bricks, if you like, a little bit like Lego bricks that you can put together to create the training that you need that corresponds to your requirements. The modules run from foundation level up to advanced level. Foundation modules are labeled 100, and they go up from 100 to 500, 500 levels being the more advanced training modules. It's all written from an international perspective. I think that's something that's very important about CIDOC, that it's the only organization that is really completely international at its point of view. We don't have, we're not tied to any particular national legislation, and it puts CIDOC in an interesting position because as you probably realize, or perhaps you may not realize, but practice of museum documentation is quite different depending on the country you're in. The vocabulary changes, the way that the documentation is organized is different. And when you come along to the CIDOC training program, we can introduce you to these different practices, different ways of doing things. So the training program has been running on an annual basis. From 2011 to 2016, we had an edition in Texas at the Museum of Texas Tech every year. We had 3 editions in Sao Paulo, in Brazil. They were given mostly in Brazilian Portuguese, some English as well. We had one in Jyväskylä in Finland in 2015. In 2018, we were in Mexico. That was in Spanish. Estonia and in Lausanne. Yes? So who is trying to say something? Is that somebody who has simply forgotten to mute their mic, or is it somebody trying to say something? I'm not sure.
It's somebody who has not muted their mic, and if you go to the participants, you can mute them.
I have done so. Yes, they're now muted. Sorry about that. Anyway, yes, please try to keep your mic off unless you want to say something, then you're welcome to talk. Okay. So let's get back to the presentation. Right. Yes, as you can see, in 2020 we organized training for the trainers in Quito in Ecuador. So we try to organize in the local language as far as possible. We did do our training in Estonia, for instance. Sometimes we're obliged to do the training in English because we don't have trainers able to give the material in the local language. But we do our best. And the modules, the material, a lot of the material is now available in more than one language. So next slide. This is an example of the sort of program that takes place if we're organizing a weekly workshop. It's pretty heavy going. I think if you've got anyone, if you talk to anyone who's participated in one of these training programs, they'll tell you that it's exhausting. We try to pack things in. There's a lot going on during the week. As you can see, it starts, this one was in, actually took place in America, in Lubbock. And it starts with an orientation reception on the Sunday evening. And then there are parallel sessions, morning and afternoon, of foundation material and advanced material. And there's a selection of modules from different aspects of the training program. And field trips organized on the Wednesday, as well as part of the teacher training program. We train all our trainers so they can take part, give them material, and take it back to wherever they come from to use the material and train other people. And then on Friday, everybody was on their knees, exhausted, and we usually finish up with some sort of reception or party so that everybody can relax and let their hair down. But it's a fairly informal and friendly way of organizing things, usually in a fairly small group. We don't usually have more than 15 people at the most, 15 people per class. But it can sometimes be a little more. In Brazil, for instance, we had some very large programs, and we had some large classes. Fortunately, everybody was very disciplined, so that worked okay. We've been organizing these events in partnership with two institutions. Museum of Texas Tech. This is a little photograph of Texas Tech. The museum was founded in 1929, and it's part of Texas Tech University. They run courses in anthropology and art, paleontology, etc. And they have a master's program in museum science. And this is one of the reasons that we chose to start partnering with the Museum of Texas Tech, because unusually they run a museum science program, but it's also a museum where all the master students actually work within the museum. So it's a hands-on, very practical way of learning how to work in a museum. Everybody, including all the teaching staff, they're all people who work actually at the museum as well. So a little bit like working at a teaching hospital. But my goodness, it is hot there. Very often in the summer, it's over 40 degrees Celsius. So you have to be careful to put on plenty of sun cream. And more recently, we've been partnering with Art Lab and EM Plus, which is the experimental museology laboratory. This is at the EPFL campus in Lausanne. That's the Federal Polytechnic for Technical Studies. And they have this marvelous building, which is 32 meters long and designed by an eminent Japanese architect. The Art Lab was inaugurated in 2016. They have three pavilions, including a museum workspace and a workshop environment. It's part of the EPFL College of Humanities. They've got a cultural platform, museum exhibition space, and a lab for experimental museology, which is where we do most of the teaching. And we're now partnering with them on a regular basis. Last year, I mean, this year, I should say, 2020 has been terrible. We haven't been able to organize any workshops for obvious reasons, I think. And I'm hoping that next year, everybody will be vaccinated and we'll be able to get back to our usual habits of having an annual event with people attending. Anyway, that's the new Art Lab campus where we're intending to hold workshops from next year. As I mentioned earlier, we have teacher training. We train all our teachers so that they know how to use the material. These are all people who are experienced museum professionals. They're people who've worked in museums and they know what they're talking about. They're not necessarily teachers. Generally, we prefer to have people who have expertise in a particular area of museum work rather than people who are teachers but don't know museums. We find that tends to work better. We provide support material for the training program, and we provide a teaching methodology, and we train everybody so that they know how to use the material properly. This is to ensure consistency and the quality of the results, and to make sure that the results are compatible. It means it gives you flexibility as a student because you can follow some of the modules in one place and then take some more somewhere else. We've had people, I think Jan actually, who's online. Jan attended some training classes in America and finished off in Jyväskylä in Finland, if I remember rightly. Jan, are you? Could you just say a couple of words about your experience as a student?
Absolutely, yes. Well, I took part in classes, as Nick just said, in Lubbock, Texas, and in Finland, in Jyväskylä. And I fulfilled basically most of the modules of the basic modules and of the advanced modules as well. And then completed also the teacher training course. That was feasible within 2 sessions plus the online sessions that you offered. To say you had some digital or some virtual classes available during the conference, which were not on the website afterwards. So that's a topic that you might want to address also today, on how you're planning to do online courses. So within 2 sessions plus some online courses, I could do basically the whole program, which was really great. I especially liked the standardized teaching of standards, which obviously allows you to take courses wherever they happen in the world. And if you do a module 101 in Texas, it will more or less be the same as if you did it in Finland, or if you did it in Mexico, or if you did it in Poland. So that's a very neat concept, which allows people to have a certificate of proficiency in the end, which basically tells another professional who you're applying to maybe what you can do and what you have already learned.
Thanks, Jan. That's very helpful. I can see Maija Ekosari from Finland is also around. Maija was actually one of the people who helped organize the workshop that we gave in Jyväskylä. Maija, could you tell us a little bit about that workshop and also perhaps about your experience doing the teacher training?
I have very fond memories of the teacher training because I think it's a common saying that those who don't know how to do something, they will teach. So that is for what I volunteered. And the teacher training really gave you the tools to the method to run the courses like they were meant to, in neat packages of 3 hours. And I still remember that in the end of the teacher training class, we had to do a demonstration that we knew what you had taught, that we had learned it. And I did my demonstration on how to interpret the laundry labels. So you can teach a lot of different kinds of skills in a 20-minute demonstration. About organizing, we were partnering with the University of Jyväskylä, where I knew the people from the museology department. And this was run as part of their summer school program. It took a little bit of thinking how to organize the registration and how to share the tasks between the local organizer and the training association. However, you had clear formats, the memorandum of understanding, where everything was written down. So it was a very good starting point. And if you get the spaces, teaching spaces for free from the university, the cost of organizing the summer school is not very high.
Thanks. I'm hoping that some of you listening today might be interested in training to become certified CIDOC trainers. That's one of our initial goals, was to try to provide material so that this training program could spread out and be used elsewhere, all around the world. We want it to be an international program. And we do have a set of people now who are available, who can provide the training. But it's, the more the merrier. There's always room for more people. So if you're interested in that, if you would like to become, you think you might like to become a trainer, get in touch with me, and I can tell you all about it and how to become a member and join in. The participants, people who take part in the training program, of course, we have students who are following the training courses, and a lot of them tend to be local, but we also have visitors. It's open to people who are members of ICOM, but also to people who are not members of ICOM. You generally get a rebate, a reduction in the cost if you're a member of ICOM already. But people who are not members of ICOM are welcome to come along. So we have actually had a few people who are just interested to find out more about museums and how they work. We've also had people who work in parallel organizations, things like libraries and archives and cultural organizations of various sorts, who occasionally come along and are interested to find out more about documentation practice. And as Jan mentioned, we also have some modules available for learning at a distance. And the lesson from this year, from COVID, is that we need to develop this more. And I will be showing you at the end some modules that are available for you to test out during the conference. And I'm hoping that you'll be giving me some feedback on that, letting me know. We'll have a look at that in more detail in a few minutes. We try to offer fee waivers to a few at least each year. It depends on our finances. CIDOC has a bursary fund, and we can use that to help people to attend. So sometimes you can, if you can provide some justification of why you should benefit from a fee waiver, then we can sometimes allow you to attend for free. That depends a little on the state of our finances, but we do try to offer a few places at least for free of charge each year. You can also participate as an author. If you think you would like to provide us with some training material, we can provide you with the template and the way of putting that together and a methodology for the training, but you don't necessarily have to be a teacher and actually deliver the material. But if you've got something you think would be interesting and you'd like to provide us with some training material, then you can author that material, and we'll be happy to put it into the catalog as material that's available for use by other institutions. And of course, as I mentioned, you can become a trainer and you can participate in our training program, which, as Jan said, takes just 2 or 3 days to complete. Generally speaking, I think it's good to have 3 days spread out over 3 days. It doesn't actually require 3 full days. It's 3 afternoons, but it can be squashed into 2 days. But that's it's a bit rushed. It's a bit it's very hard work to do it in 2 days, but it is possible. So those are the different ways that you can participate in the training program. Actually, there's another way of participating, and that is you can actually join the association, become a member of the CIDOC Training Association, and be part of the board of the CIDOC Training Association, which runs. We set up an association, I think maybe it's worth pointing this out, so that we could be financially independent, and primarily so that we could actually own the copyright on the material. The CIDOC itself isn't a legal entity. So it's ICOM. ICOM is a legal entity, but CIDOC is not. And we wanted to have the ability to organize and run our affairs as an independent association. So we now have this legal entity, the CIDOC Training Association, which is based in Switzerland. So there we are. The training modules, there are 3 different types of module. The most common is the face-to-face classroom teaching, and that takes place in a traditional classroom setting. They do involve quite a lot of practical work. So you may, when I say a traditional classroom setting, that might actually require going outside, possibly jumping around a bit and going into a workshop. It's not just sitting down facing a blackboard listening to people talking. There's quite a lot of hands-on work involved as well. We also have online course material. These are interactive computer-based courses, and I'll be able to show you some of those in just a moment. And finally, there's one module, which is the independent study module, where you do some research and you provide us with a written paper. And that's something you can do. You're allowed to do any number of independent study subjects, and they will be commented and evaluated by the members of the training program, and published as training study work. The format for the classroom is 3 hours of what we call contact time. It may actually last a bit longer because people tend to go out for coffee breaks and things, but it's 3 hours of actual teaching. That's 2 times 90 minutes. And each section is divided up into 20-minute sections. So there'll be a little bit of presentation, some exercises, some group work, and so on. This is meant to be easily accessible and fun as well. It's supposed to be, it's not just sitting down listening to people talking. You have to get involved. The woman you can see in the photograph there, that's Buma Dashnindev from Mongolia. The training program actually exists partly thanks to her. She accosted me, I think is the only word for it, when we were at the conference in, let me think, it was in Santiago in Chile. And we'd gone out for a visit to visit the, we think it was a house, a historical house we were visiting. Anyway, during this visit, we were walking around and she grabbed me by the lapels and shook me quite vigorously, saying, "We need training, we need more training." So I said, okay, we'll do something. So you've got Buma Dashnindev to thank for the existence of the training program. The photograph was taken in Texas. She actually attended when she attended one of the training programs. So for these 3 hours of Training, we provide teaching material, usually in the form of PowerPoint slides and guidelines for the tutors. So, and that's what helps to ensure the consistency of the material, to make sure that things are pretty much the same, whether you're attending in Lubbock or in Sao Paulo in Brazil, wherever you happen to be. I think somebody's just added something to the chat. Whoops, which I've, see if I can just read that, see what it was. Okay. Yes, question about the training material, which wasn't necessarily too clear. Yes, I said that the training program can be, if you want to train as a trainer, that can be completed in 2 days, or as I recommended, 3 days. However, if you're doing the training as a student to obtain the certificate of proficiency, that takes more time than that. You have to do up to 14 modules to complete. Usually that's organized as a workshop lasting a week or so. And there's another question from Marianne asking me how to contact you. Yes, you can contact me through the CIDOC website. I'll be showing you I'll be putting my email on the screen at the end. Okay, so put that down. Right, teaching guidelines. Has anybody else got any questions, things that I've said that were confusing that I can clarify? And feel free to use your microphone and talk. Might be easier than chatting. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. It's Morgana.
Morgana.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Actually, I wanted to ask, because you already talked about how there are some online sessions, but I was wondering if there is a possibility of having online training, like from now on, because we don't know when we're going to have a possible hands-on conference or training session. And even though documentation training is supposed to be hands-on, obviously, but yeah, I just wondered if it's a possibility. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I can hear somebody else. I think somebody needs to mute their microphone.
You can do it, Nick.
I'm just trying to see who it is.
Oh,
no.
Yeah.
No. Haven't found the.
Oh, Hassan is.
There we are. Got it.
You check
okay.
on the participants,
Yeah.
and then you mute them.
As there are a lot of participants, I have to scroll through the list. Anyway, good. That's it. Yes, online training. Well, we're working on this. We've got quite a lot of material available online. There is a drawback to doing online training. It's very difficult to explain the practical aspects of how to do something. Or I should say, it's not so difficult to explain, but it's difficult to check that you're doing it right. Anybody who's ever tried learning a musical instrument, for instance, you'll know that it's a physical skill, and it requires practice, and it's difficult to be sure that you're doing it right from the get-go. Just watching videos and things of people, that's not always enough. And that's why we like to do things as hands-on practical workshops. And we're trying to find ways to make this possible, to make it work, and more material will be made online, will be made available. I suppose my attitude to online training is that it's better than nothing. And if you're stuck at home during a pandemic, of course, it might be all that's possible. I'm hoping that we'll still be able to organize physical workshops where people can participate and take part, but we're trying to make as much material as possible available online for online training. Have I answered your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. make that a little bit smaller. And I think I've accidentally skipped back through the slides. There we are. Adaptability. Yes, this is important. As I mentioned earlier, some of the modules translated, we try to give them in the local language, but adapting the material isn't just a question of translating. We found that what works in the United States won't necessarily work in Brazil or won't work in Estonia. There are a lot of reasons for that. One of the difficulties is the educational fees. Some countries have free education, some have expensive education. What people can afford to pay varies, obviously, according to the economic status of the country. So we do try to adapt the fees to meet the, to fit in with the local economy. Also, the educational level varies. I mean that in terms of knowledge about museology and so on. For instance, let's use Brazil as an example. They have classes in museology available, but not so many practical, hands-on, vocational training. It's mostly theoretical. Actually, do we have anybody available online, since I'm using Brazil as an example? I just wondering if there's anybody from Brazil present in the meeting. There might be somebody.
Well, I'm Morgana again. I am Brazilian, but I wasn't trained in museology in Brazil. So.
Morgan, are you are you familiar with the museology training programs in Brazil at all, or?
A little bit, but not a lot. So okay. I can talk about it in the sense that I've made research about what I wanted to study there, and I know what they're researching about. But yeah, I've never done it.
Okay, I was just wondering if you would, agree with my view, my assertion that the training that's available, or the education, it's more, it's got a sort of academic flavor rather than a practical vocational flavor in Brazil.
Yes, but I think it really comes depending on the area. Mostly I found that there is a focus on theoretical approach, especially with social museology, and it's very it's in a specific region, and there is a practical approach, but it's in the center of Brazil, in Goiás and Goiânia. So they have in the Ouro Preto city, which is a very old city, it's in the state of Minas Gerais, they have a more practical approach, and they have a lot of experience with that. But in the rest of the country is more theoretical, absolutely. So I do understand why you say that. This is why I actually am not studying museology there.
Okay, yeah.
I did study museology in Brazil. I started studying in 2000, I think it was 2007, perhaps, and it was in the south of Brazil. The program, when I started, it was the third school of museology, so it was not really a very, I would say it's not a very good program, but I'm referring to the standards of museology, worldwide standards. We did have a practical approach, but we were also having some big lagoons, especially, for example, in documentation. There was a lot of inexperienced people, practically inexperienced people, trying to train new students, but they were trying to learn fast, so it would be the best product of whatever it was, being delivered at that moment. So I'm currently living in Paraguay, and I'm moving to Uruguay. Here in Paraguay, it's almost non-existent. So we don't have a museology program here, and many of the museums, they depend on collaborations with international organizations to be able to approach some standards. I did receive some training from a Spanish collaboration program that we had here in Paraguay. And I'm currently working with an association, which is of museologists and people that work in museums, but that are not professionals. And this association is looking to professionalize the people that are working inside the museums. And the standards are pretty low here, we have to say that. And it's very basic. Even object ID here is almost like unknown. So it's very difficult to, it's like starting from zero with almost nothing, experience, almost no experience.
Well, thank you, but thank you both for those contributions. I think the point I was trying to make, I think that bears out what I was trying to say, that things are very variable according to where you're from, and things vary from one country to another, and also from one region to another. There are different traditions. I know here in Switzerland, where I live, we have a problem with museology training, that there's a big difference between the way it's done in the German-speaking part of Switzerland and the French-speaking part of Switzerland. The culture, the approach is different, and it's difficult. Sometimes there aren't enough students, so the program might be available one year and not the next. It's a little bit inconsistent, and this is something we find pretty much all over the world. So adaptability. We're trying to adapt to the economic situation, also the culture, as it were, the educational background, the language, obviously. We try to, as much as possible, to organize the training programs in the local language. The organizational culture also, the way that museums run. I'm not sure if you may not be familiar with this, but a few years ago, ICOM published a little description of the key jobs that exist, job descriptions for key jobs in museums. And it's a definition and a description of what different people do in the museum. ICOM Switzerland then published a copy of that with their own descriptions that were incompatible mainly, and they went to the trouble of providing a description of the differences between the Swiss approach and the ICOM approach, which I think highlights the problem of trying to define who does what in a museum at an international level. There's just so much variation between different countries. One of the obvious examples, I think, is the notion of registrar, which in some countries just doesn't exist. How many of you, who is there anybody listening who has a job as a registrar in a museum? Complete silence. No registrars, I take it.
Partially, I would say partially, because I'm sure I'm not meeting all the standards that you might consider, but that's something that I do here as well, yes. And
is that your job title? Are you called registrar?
No, absolutely not. It's really, I would say, it's an informal profession here still. Somebody else is also doing it. It's like a historian is doing it, or someone working in the museum, but it's not exactly a professional.
Okay, that I think that's one of the major differences we have between different organizational approaches. I know in the United States, a museum without a registrar is unheard of. Every museum has a registrar, and there's a quite well-defined job description for what you need to do and what the registrar does. The museum where I work at the moment in Lausanne, the Olympic Museum, there is no registrar. The work of the registrar is done, but it's divided up between curators, collections management specialists, and exhibition people. So it's not a job that exists as per se. And there are countless examples of this kind of difference of approach. And so we have to adapt our material to make sure that it's the terminology we're using and the structures we're describing are fit the local circumstances. So there's a whole A lot of questions about, as it were, museum culture, the culture of the museum, not just culture in the museum, but the cultural, the tradition, the museum tradition in the country. So, what are our strengths? I'd say, I'd like you to take away these 5 things. First of all, that it's a modular training program. It's organized in partnership with academic institutions. So we have a really, I hope, a good academic level, and it's something that it's of high quality. It's adaptable. We adapt the material, the language to local requirements. There's a quality of control mechanism. We make sure that we get feedback, and we're constantly trying to improve the material and make sure that it's as good as it possibly can be. And we also have, I hope, a sustainable business model, a way of organizing the training program that's financially viable, so that we can offer a training program, training at a cost that's acceptable and meets the needs of the people in different countries as an international program. If you're thinking that maybe you'd like to organize some training at your institution, what do you have to bear in mind? Well, each event is unique. It's specific to the local organization. And if you're organizing a training event, you choose what the material is and how long it's going to take place. And you can organize it pretty much any way you like. There are a few basic requirements, though. We need to have access to some museum collections. We use the museum collections as an example while we're teaching, and we refer to specific examples, specific case studies from the local collections, and that's very important. You need to have teaching facilities. Basically, that means a room with a projector and so on, just very basic accommodation, suitable for a teaching environment, somewhere where people can concentrate. And if it's going to be a week-long event, of course, people need to be able to stay locally, so some sort of reasonably priced accommodation. One of the nice things about doing it at a university campus in the United States is that all the students go away during the summer. They go home on vacation, so we have student accommodation available. It's very low cost. Food, that's very important. We have to feed people. If we're working in a city environment, it's very easy for people to go out for lunch and then not come back. So we try to organize food in situ, make sure that people can get sustenance and refreshment without having to run around looking for somewhere to go and eat. Local teaching staff, we can provide teachers who can come in and do the training, but generally we find it's much better to have people who are local, who know the country and know the institutions, who can actually do the training. So we try to train local people, and it's good to have a few assistants as well. It's amazing the number of people who need to make a trip to their embassy or the local hospital for one thing or another, or a doctor, or people always there's always somebody who needs a little bit of help, and having some assistants who can take care of that during the training program is invaluable, because they can make sure that people are well looked after, and any little problems that crop up, they can be dealt with smoothly and efficiently. So I've got a few pictures here from the training program we organized in Lausanne at the EPFL. This was in 2018. We had a focus on intangible cultural heritage. You can see there in the background furthest from the picture, that's Manvi Seth, who is a member of CIDOC, and she organized she organizes the working group on intangible cultural heritage, and she came to Lausanne to take part in the training workshop that we were running. And you can see people here near the lake in Lausanne. And we did some training on Kung Fu. And this was part of the Intangible Cultural Heritage workshop. And everybody was down by the lake shore, actually doing this was a hands-on training. The point of doing this was so that people could actually experience what it meant to try to learn a new skill and how, what that involved. And rather than just sitting in a classroom discussing the problems, we actually had the practical experience of trying to do things, trying to learn some Kung Fu movements ourselves. There you can see the discussions taking place, the group work gets quite animated sometimes. There's Manvi teaching in the classroom. And this is one of the workshops in the experimental museology workshop environment. That's the lake near the training facility in Lausanne. It's a pleasant environment. When the weather's nice, you can go for a swim. This is one of the participants who's taking part. And that's the group there with Manvi in the middle, and that's me sitting down in front of them. This was the group that took part in the training workshop that was organized in conjunction with a symposium on intangible cultural heritage that was organized at the art lab on the campus. So thank you very much for listening. We'll go on in a moment to have a look at the online modules. You can see my email address there. You can contact me at nicholas@crofts.ch, which is sort of easy to remember. And you can also contact us through the CIDOC website. The address for that is cidoc.icom.museum. And you'll find a link there to all the training material. There's some online modules available directly there, plus instructions about how to get in touch with us, information about the training events, and about how to organize training at your institution. And the bottom link is to the online modules that will be available during the conference this week. So you can have a look at those, and I'll show you a little bit more about those in just a moment. However, before we go on, I wanted to ask if there are any questions, if there are things that you'd like to ask me, things I could clarify, or any questions you might have about what we've been looking at so far.